On October 17, 2019, what began as an ordinary evening for Lisa Martinez, a 42-year-old mathematics teacher at Roosevelt High School in St. Louis, Missouri. At approximately 8:43 p.m., Martinez was taking her usual shortcut through the Riverfront Industrial District after attending a parent-teacher conference that had run late. The area, known for its abandoned warehouses and sparse foot traffic after business hours, was generally avoided by locals after dark. However, Martinez, having used this route for over 7 years without incident, had grown comfortable with the 4-block detour that saved her 12 minutes on her commute back to her apartment in the Benton Park neighborhood. As Martinez approached the intersection of Chouteau Avenue and South 7th Street, she heard shouting coming from an alley beside the former Westbrook manufacturing facility. According to her subsequent testimony, Martinez initially intended to ignore the disturbance, but the sound of what she described as a man begging for his life prompted her to investigate. From her position behind a dumpster, Martinez observed 3 men in plainclothes attacking a 4th man who was later identified as Terrell Jackson, a 35-year-old known police informant. Court records would later confirm that Jackson had been working with the St. Louis County Drug Task Force to provide information on drugs distribution networks operating within the city's eastern districts. Detective phone records would later reveal that the 3 men were Lieutenant James Burns, 44, Officer Michael Dominguez, 38, and Officer Wesley Hargrove, 31. All members of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's Special Operations Division. Unbeknownst to their superiors, these officers had been operating an extortion scheme targeting local drug dealers for at least 3 years, demanding payment for protection and information about upcoming raids. Recognizing the severity of what she was witnessing, Martinez began recording the assault using her iPhone 8. The video, which lasted 3 minutes and 47 seconds, clearly showed the officers repeatedly striking Jackson while demanding to know who he'd been talking to, and warning about what happens to rats. During the assault, none of the officers noticed Martinez's presence. What Martinez failed to realize was that a security camera mounted on the adjacent pawn shop had captured her recording the incident. The camera, installed by the property owner following a series of break-ins earlier that year, transmitted footage to a remote server. After the officers departed with Jackson, who according to the medical examiner's later report was still alive at this point, Martinez immediately left the scene. Digital records from her iCloud account confirm that she uploaded the video at 9:12 p.m. while waiting for her bus. The file was automatically backed up to her personal cloud storage. At 9:28 p.m., Martinez placed a call to Mabel Miller, a 38-year-old investigative journalist with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Phone records indicate their conversation lasted 4 minutes and 22 seconds. According to Mabel's sworn statement, Martinez told her, "I have material that will blow up this city. These cops are dirty, Mabel. I saw them beating a man half to death. I need to show you this video tomorrow." Meanwhile, Lieutenant James Burns, who headed the corrupt group within the department, was alerted to Martinez's presence by Officer Dominguez, who had been assigned to review security footage from the area as part of their standard protocol to ensure their activities remained undetected. At 11:37 p.m., Burns convened an emergency meeting with his associates at a rarely used storage facility on the outskirts of Jennings, a suburb north of St. Louis. Forensic analysis of the officers' communications revealed that during this meeting, Burns authorized what he termed a containment operation to identify and neutralize the witness. By midnight, using police resources, they had identified Lisa Martinez through the security footage and her bus pass, which she had used to board the number 42 bus shortly after witnessing the assault. Martinez, completely unaware that she had been identified, returned to her 1-bedroom apartment on Wyoming Street, where she lived alone following her divorce from Thomas Clark in 2015. According to her sister's testimony, Lisa believed that turning over the evidence to a journalist would ensure her safety through public exposure of the corruption. By the morning of October 18th, Burns and his team had compiled a comprehensive profile on Lisa Martinez, including her home address, daily routine, and social connections. On September 15, 2019, Detective James Burns and his narcotics unit identified Lisa Martinez through the vehicle registration database. Her black Toyota Camry, captured earlier that day, led them directly to her residence in Spokane, Washington. Within hours, Burns coordinated with corrupt Sheriff Michael Dawson to execute an unauthorized raid on Martinez's residence. At 11:45 p.m., Burns and 4 officers, Thomas Reed, Stephen Cooper, Marcus Johnson, and Kevin Walsh, forced entry into Martinez's home. They strategically planted illegal substances and related paraphernalia throughout the house. Martinez was forcibly taken to the abandoned Riverside Industrial Complex on the outskirts of Spokane. During the 3-hour interrogation, Martinez remained resolute despite severe physical intimidation. The team's forensic analysis of her iPhone revealed a pattern of calls to a Washington, D.C. number. Between August and September 2019, Martinez had made 23 calls to this number, with conversations lasting an average of 12 minutes. Burns, increasingly desperate to contain the situation, made a fatal decision. At 3:20 a.m. on September 16, Martinez was killed through a forced injection of lethal substances. The team carefully staged the scene in her home, positioning her body in the bathroom with drug paraphernalia and a falsified suicide note. Sheriff Dawson, who received monthly payments of $25,000 from Burns's illegal operation, ensured the death investigation remained superficial. County Medical Examiner Dr. Robert Phillips, under pressure from Dawson, ruled the death as an accidental overdose. The case was closed within 48 hours. The Washington, D.C. phone number, later identified as belonging to investigative journalist Mark Thompson, would prove crucial to the eventual exposure of Burns's operation. However, at the time, Burns's team failed to recognize its significance, focusing instead on their immediate cover-up efforts. The falsified evidence, including planted illegal substances and fabricated toxicology reports, was logged into the Spokane Police Department's evidence system. These items would later become key exhibits in the federal prosecution of Burns and his associates, demonstrating the elaborate lengths taken to conceal their criminal enterprise. The staged overdose initially appeared convincing to local investigators, but inconsistencies in the evidence would later draw attention from federal authorities. The precision of the lethal injection, the suspicious timing of Martinez's death, and the convenient discovery of illegal substances in her home would eventually be scrutinized by FBI investigators, revealing the true nature of her death. The involvement of Sheriff Dawson in covering up the murder demonstrated the depth of corruption within local law enforcement. His influence extended beyond the police department, affecting various aspects of the criminal justice system in Spokane. On October 3, 2019, Jason Clark completed his final contract operation in Guadalajara, Mexico. The former Delta Force operative, who served 8 years in special operations, demonstrated his tactical expertise by successfully eliminating a high-profile target despite heavy security. The mission's success was overshadowed by an encrypted message from his mother, Lisa Martinez. The message contained only 2 words: Eagle, ARC 67. This emergency code, established after his father's death in 2012, triggered immediate concern. The reference to ARK 67 pointed to their former family residence in Arkansas, situated 67 miles from Little Rock on the state highway. Clark abandoned his extraction protocol and crossed the border into Texas within hours. Upon reaching Spokane, Washington, he discovered his mother had been found dead 2 weeks earlier. The local authorities had quickly ruled it an accidental overdose, despite his mother's well-documented aversion to any substances following her husband's battle with prescription medication addiction. At the funeral service on October 7th, Clark observed unmarked police vehicles conducting surveillance. His military training allowed him to identify multiple plainclothes officers monitoring the ceremony from strategic positions around the cemetery. Following the funeral, Clark drove to Arkansas, reaching the abandoned family property known as the Ark early on October 9th. The house, untouched since his father's passing, held a crucial secret. In the master bedroom, beneath loose floorboards his father had installed decades ago, Clark discovered a USB drive and a handwritten letter from his mother. The letter detailed the events leading to her death, including her accidental recording of Detective James Burns and his team during an illegal operation. She named the corrupt officers involved: Burns, Thomas Reed, Stephen Cooper, Marcus Johnson, and Kevin Walsh. The letter also implicated Sheriff Michael Dawson and medical examiner Dr. Robert Phillips in the subsequent cover-up. Clark transformed the abandoned house into an operations center, applying his military intelligence training to build comprehensive profiles of each target. He meticulously gathered information about their routines, relationships, and vulnerabilities. The walls of his father's old study became covered with surveillance photos, duty rosters, and connection maps linking the corrupt officers to various criminal activities. His investigation revealed that Burns's team had been operating a sophisticated drug trafficking network for at least 5 years, using their positions within law enforcement to facilitate distribution and eliminate threats. The corruption extended beyond the initial group, encompassing various officials within the Spokane law enforcement community. Clark's military experience in intelligence gathering and strategic planning proved invaluable. He established surveillance points around Spokane, documenting the team's movements and identifying their secure locations. His training in counter-surveillance allowed him to operate undetected while building a comprehensive understanding of their operation. The evidence compiled by Clark revealed a pattern of similar incidents where potential witnesses had died under suspicious circumstances, all ruled as accidents or suicides by the compromised medical examiner. His mother's death was part of a larger pattern of systematic elimination of threats to Burns's operation. On October 15, 2019, Jason Clark initiated surveillance of Officer Michael Patterson, the youngest member of Burns's corrupt unit. Patterson, a 27-year-old patrol officer, maintained a predictable routine between his residence in western Spokane and various locations tied to the illegal operation. Clark's surveillance revealed Patterson's gambling addiction and mounting debts at several local establishments. The officer frequently visited illegal gambling venues, where he accumulated significant losses while moonlighting as security for Burns's distribution network. On October 23, Clark executed a precisely planned operation. Using Patterson's gambling habits, he orchestrated a situation at a local establishment where Patterson was forced to accept a ride home in an allegedly intoxicated state. During the journey, Clark staged a single-vehicle accident on a remote road. The calculated impact left Patterson with severe injuries but ensured his survival. From his hospital bed at Sacred Heart Medical Center, a severely injured Patterson made a crucial phone call to Detective Burns. The conversation, later recovered from phone records. Patterson's panic-stricken warning about someone targeting them marked the first indication that Burns's team had become prey rather than hunters. 6 days later, on October 29th, Clark tracked Officer Tom Riggs during his night patrol in Spokane's industrial district. Riggs, a 15-year veteran of the force, was found dead at 3:45 a.m. in his patrol vehicle. The scene was methodically staged to appear as a gang-related shooting, complete with false evidence suggesting local gang involvement. The precision of both attacks demonstrated advanced tactical planning. The incidents occurred in areas without surveillance cameras, and the evidence left at each scene deliberately misled investigators toward different conclusions. Clark's military experience in staging operations became evident in the execution, though this connection remained unknown to investigators at the time. Mabel Miller, an investigative reporter, began examining connections between these incidents and Lisa Martinez's death. Miller's investigation uncovered irregularities in the official reports surrounding Martinez's alleged overdose, including inconsistencies in the toxicology findings and witness statements that had been overlooked. The attacks generated significant tension within the Spokane Police Department. Officers who had previously turned a blind eye to Burns's activities began distancing themselves, fearing they might become targets. This growing isolation forced Burns to rely increasingly on his core team, making their movements more predictable. Clark's systematic approach to dismantling Burns's operation reflected his military training in psychological warfare. Each incident was designed not only to eliminate threats, but to create maximum uncertainty within the corrupt network. The surviving officers began to question their security, leading to mistakes that would later prove crucial in their downfall. Miller's reporting gradually pieced together a pattern of suspicious deaths and police corruption. Her articles, while careful to avoid direct accusations, raised questions about the relationship between recent police casualties and several unsolved cases involving alleged police misconduct. This media attention added another layer of pressure to Burns's already strained operation. On November 12, 2019, Detective Burns and 3 remaining officers confronted journalist Mabel Miller. The confrontation occurred after hours when Miller was finalizing her investigative piece connecting multiple suspicious deaths to police corruption. During the attempted abduction, Jason Clark intervened, resulting in an intense exchange of gunfire that left 2 officers wounded. Clark sustained a gunshot wound to his left shoulder, but managed to secure Miller's escape. The firefight caused significant damage to the newspaper office and left crucial evidence of police aggression, including bullet casings from service weapons. Miller transported Clark to her secure apartment, where she treated his injury. During his recovery, Clark revealed his identity as Lisa Martinez's son and presented the video evidence of police corruption. The footage, combined with Miller's extensive investigation, exposed the full scope of Burns's criminal enterprise. Miller's investigation uncovered financial records showing systematic extortion of local drug operations since 2011. The documentation revealed monthly payments to Sheriff Michael Dawson, totaling $25,000, with additional evidence of District Attorney William Hayes blocking federal investigations in 2014, 2016, and 2018. Financial analysis of offshore accounts linked to Burns's operation revealed deposits exceeding $15 million. The investigation connected 11 suspicious deaths to instances where witnesses threatened to expose the corruption. Each death had been officially ruled as either suicide or accidental, with medical examiner Dr. Phillips facilitating the cover-ups. Burns, having lost 4 officers to Clark's systematic campaign, reached out to Miguel Salvatore, head of a prominent drug cartel. Salvatore, whose operation benefited from Burns's protection, dispatched 4 professional assassins to Spokane. The hired killers, led by former Special Forces operator Rafael Morales, began surveillance operations throughout the city. The presence of cartel assassins escalated the situation beyond a local police matter. Their involvement drew attention from federal agencies, who had been monitoring Salvatore's organization. The DEA began parallel surveillance operations, tracking both the assassins and Burns's remaining officers. The documentation gathered by Miller and Clark exposed how Burns's team manipulated police resources to facilitate their criminal enterprise. They used official vehicles for drug transportation, manipulated evidence storage facilities, and utilized police databases to identify and eliminate potential threats to their operation. The financial investigation revealed an elaborate money laundering scheme involving local businesses and corrupt banking officials. The operation's proceeds were channeled through legitimate enterprises before being transferred to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Clark's military expertise proved crucial in anticipating and countering the cartel assassins' tactics. His understanding of professional hit teams allowed him to maintain operational security while continuing his campaign against Burns's organization. On December 5, 2019, Jason Clark and Mabel Miller orchestrated an operation to confront Detective Burns at the abandoned Riverside manufacturing complex. Their carefully planned trap was compromised when Rafael Morales and 3 cartel assassins arrived at the location, having tracked Burns's movements. The ensuing confrontation began at 11:20 p.m. Clark, utilizing his military training, systematically eliminated Morales's team in a series of tactical engagements throughout the complex. The firefight resulted in significant casualties, with all 4 cartel assassins neutralized. Burns sustained multiple gunshot wounds but survived. Under duress, Burns provided a full confession, recorded on Miller's equipment. He detailed Lisa Martinez's murder and exposed the entire criminal network, including Congressman Robert Henderson and District Attorney William Hayes. The confession revealed weekly payments to Henderson totaling $75,000 for political protection and Hayes's role in obstructing federal investigations. At 1:15 a.m., as Clark prepared to leave the scene, FBI Special Agent Sarah Morrison and her tactical team surrounded the complex. The FBI had been conducting a separate 2-year investigation into Burns's connection to interstate drug trafficking. The timing of their intervention prevented Clark's escape. The subsequent federal investigation led to 47 arrests across 3 states, including 12 law enforcement officers, 5 judicial officials, and 3 state legislators. The evidence recovered from Burns's confession and Miller's investigation exposed corruption extending into multiple government agencies. During his trial in March 2020, Clark faced multiple charges of first-degree murder. His defense, led by attorney Michael Foster, argued that the deaths were justified given the systematic corruption that had protected Burns's organization. The prosecution, while acknowledging the exposure of corruption, maintained that Clark's actions constituted vigilante justice. In his final statement to the court, Clark addressed the fundamental failures of the justice system. He spoke about his mother's murder and the institutional corruption that had allowed criminals to operate within law enforcement. His statement resonated with the public, sparking debates about police accountability and systemic corruption. The trial concluded with Clark receiving multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. However, his actions led to significant reforms in law enforcement oversight. The evidence he and Miller gathered resulted in the creation of an independent commission to investigate police corruption in Washington state. Lisa Martinez's death was officially reclassified as a homicide, clearing her reputation. The investigation into her murder led to additional charges against Burns and his associates, including conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The corrupt officers involved in her death received sentences ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. Miller's subsequent book about the case became a catalyst for national police reform discussions. Her reporting exposed how deeply corruption had penetrated law enforcement and political institutions, leading to legislative changes in police oversight and accountability. Clark's final message to Miller from prison emphasized the personal cost of exposing institutional corruption. His sacrifice led to the dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for nearly a decade, though at the expense of his own freedom.